My name is Phil Young and I'm a teacher at the Essex Middle School in Essextown, Vermont. And today we're going to make a button chair without using a CNC routing table. And I'm going to walk you through the process of doing that, and it's going to be the exact way I have done it with my students. So the first step to making the button chair is to go to the button chair website and print off the PDF that is provided. And the PDF is to scale of the chair. So all you have to do is glue the templates together and you'll have an exact pattern. So what I do is I lay it all out. And you can see on the template everything is numbered, so you just line up the numbers. And I'll just do two pieces for right now. There's two legs. There's leg A and leg B, and there's a slight difference between the two. That's why you have to have two different templates. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on the red line, cut the excess paper off on the red line. And I'm going to just do two sides. And that allows me to overlap and line up the template perfectly with the previous page. So I use just a stick of glue and I just line up the edges carefully. And there you've connected the two patterns. And now what I'm going to do is do the same thing on this side. This time I'll probably just cut this one edge off. Glue, line up the edges of the chair, the legs, and then what I would do is go through the rest of the pattern and line everything up. There's going to be 6 pages in all, and then in the end you'll end up with a template that looks like this. I've cut off some of the excess so that I can then glue it onto the piece of plywood. So I've cut a piece of plywood that measures 34 inches by 19 inches, and that will give you just enough space to cut out both sets of legs. What I do is I glue using spray glue. I glue the template onto the piece of plywood, and then the second one just gets flipped upside down and glued down the same way. You want to make sure that you're, it's nice if your pattern is laying on there square. So I try to line up the edges with the feet or the top right there. So one trick with spray glue is you're supposed to spray both surfaces. So I would want to spray the plywood and then also spray the template. However, in this case, I find it's a lot easier if I just spray the plywood because I don't want the template to stick so quickly. I want to be able to move it around a little bit. If you spray both surfaces, you really can't move it around. So what I'm going to do is spray the top of the plywood. And then I'm going to fit this on. And see how I have to kind of move it around to get it square? And that allows me to do that because I didn't also spray the paper. And now I flip this up and spray the rest, lay it down. Work my way from the center out so there's not any creases like that. And there you have your template ready to go on your 34 by 19 inch piece of plywood. After you've glued your template on your piece of plywood, you want to take a second and make sure you put on your safety glasses and use some ear protection so that you're well protected moving forward, because you'll now be using power tools. Also, you want to make sure that you're taking your time and not rushing, and using all tools appropriately, and follow all safety precautions. So for the next step, when you're cutting the two leg bases apart, there's 3 tools you could use. You could use a jigsaw, you could use a circular saw, and I'm going to use my track saw just because I have it, and that's the tool that for me is the easiest. So I'm going to set that up and make that cut right now. For that cut, I just wanted to get my base into 2 pieces. I wasn't trying to take out, to be on the line of the template. I just need 2 pieces. So now I have to cut out the legs, and I need to cut out as close to the line on the template as possible. There's 2 saws you could use. You can use the jigsaw if that's what you have at home. I have a bandsaw here, so I'll be cutting mine out on the bandsaw. One thing I like to do when I cut it out is I like to leave just a little bit of white from the template, so that then I remove the rest by hand with a file or by sanding, but I want to say just off the line. So after you've cut out both leg bases, you need to clean up the edges. What I chose to do is I used a 1/4" round over bit on my router, and then take some sandpaper, do some sanding on the edges, get all the rough spots off, and then on the face of the legs, I use the palm sander just to sand everything up nice and smooth and get out any slivers. After you've cut out your leg base and you cut out your notch where the 2 leg bases join, if you leave the line, you're going to have a very tight fit. So you have to go in there by hand and file it until you can join your 2 leg bases. The reason why you want to do that is because you want to have a very tight fit. You don't want to cut it so that it's loose. And I'll show you an example of that. And now, without any glue, screws, this leg base is not coming apart. So your next step in making the button chair by hand instead of from the CNC routing machine is to make the seats. You have 2 circles that you have to cut out. You have a 7" diameter circle, which is the base. That's what connects to the 2 legs. And then you have a 10" diameter circle for the top, which is the part that you actually sit on. You make your pattern exactly the same way for the 10" as we did for the legs. Put some glue, overlap, line up the edges, and you'll be able to get your 10" template. So we're going to start off by making the 7" circle. And the nice thing about the 7" circle is you can use the scrap from the center of your leg base to make the 7" circle. And this is just a piece of scrap from another leg base that I cut out. And because I have to make so many seats with my students, I made a jig to help with the process. And this is something you could do at home too. So the way the jig is set up is I placed a bolt. This happens to be 3/16 of an inch. It doesn't have to be. This is what I had, so this is what I used. And I measured exactly the radius from the edge of the jig to the center of the bolt. In this case, it's exactly 3.5 inches. I took my piece of scrap plywood, I measured, I roughly found the center and drilled a 3/16 inch hole. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attach the two just by kind of threading it on. And I'm going to take this over to my bandsaw and cut out a perfect 7-inch diameter circle. On the bottom of a jig, I just put a piece of plywood so that I could square it up exactly on the table of my bandsaw with the blade. The blade rests right on the edge of the jig, which is going to give me exactly 3.5 inch radius from that bolt. And so now I'll set the jig up and make the cut. And now I have a perfect 7-inch diameter circle. And this 3/16 hole is actually going to be used when you attach this to the leg base, so it's okay that it's there. We're going to put a screw right through that. So remember, if you don't have access to a bandsaw, you can easily do everything I've done so far with a jigsaw. Taking the 7-inch template, you can just glue it to your piece of plywood, and you can take a jigsaw and carefully cut it out. And then clean it up with some files and some sandpaper. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate how to make the depression for the ball that sits in between the bottom plate, which is the 7-inch plate, and the top plate, which is the 10-inch plate. I'm going to demonstrate that on this lathe. And if you know someone or have a lathe, you can quickly do it too. And if you don't, we will be demonstrating how to do it on a drill press. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to have a 2-inch diameter depression. So from the center of the 7-inch circle, I've measured over 1 inch, which would then make a 2-inch diameter depression. The next step is to then give it a good sanding, and then you'll be all set. I would also like to say that I'm not a professional wood turner. I've been self-taught, and I have found a system that works for me for this, the ButtOn chair. It might not work for you, but you just have to kind of find your own way, like I did. Thanks. Okay, so now we're gonna demonstrate how to build make the depression in the 10-inch circle for your seat. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk down a series of drill bits, and we're gonna use 2 hole saw bits and then 2 Forstner bits. I'd prefer to use all Forstner bits. They work much better than the hole saws, but I don't have all the sizes, so we're gonna do it this way. More than likely, most people are going to have to use a combination as well, because most people don't have large Forstner bits. So the first thing I did I used my largest bit. It's got a 2-inch diameter. It happens to be one of the hole saw bits. And I went down into the seat about 3/16 of an inch. And that's going to actually be the highest point of the depression, and we're going to work our way down from there. My next bit is 1 7/8 inches, so I'm just working my way down slowly with the diameter of the bit. I'm now jumping down to 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit, but you know, if you had 1.5 inches, you could use that too. This is just what I have. It seems to be okay, it works. So with each bit, you're going to go down an 1/8 deeper. So that every time you put a new bit on, you're going to be creating a slight depression going into the center of the seat. So I now have, what size is this? This is a 7/8 bit. This will be my last one that I do. So now, since I don't have the bit to take that out, I just have to kind of chip it out by hand, which I'll do over here. So all I've done is just chipped it out, and you can see that the ball sits nicely snug in that depression. I'm gonna also sand this all up so it looks nice, but for the most part it's covered anyways. If you're choosing to use a lathe to turn the depressions in your seats for your button chair, please make sure you follow all safety precautions when it comes to wood turning. This video is not a safety video on wood turning. This is just a quick look at how to create the depressions for your button chair. I wanted to show you one more thing. If you have a lathe, you can turn some grooves in the top of the seat, and that will help people from sliding off the chair when it pivots on the ball. And I'm going to do that real quick so you can see. Alright, so the next step is to drill your holes that is going to allow whatever you're using for the cord to attach the 7-inch circle and the 10-inch circle together. In our case, we're using this thicker bungee cord, and a 5/16 hole works perfectly. And I'm going to put the holes exactly where they are on the template. I already have them marked on my 7-inch circle. I'm going to now drill the 5/16 holes in the same spot on the 10-inch seat. Okay, we've come to the final stage of building your own button chair, and that is to assemble the 7-inch base, the legs, and then also attach the ball and the 10-inch seat using a bungee cord. You can I like to use wood glue and 5 deck screws to attach the 7-inch base. to the chairs. For a screw, you can use 1 1/4 up to 2 inches. Would work fine. I'm using 1 1/4 deck screw. I'm going to first put glue. And I'm just using Tight Bond 3. You can use Tight Bond 1, 2, or 3. Yellow wood glue. And the holes for the bungee need to be offset from the legs. So I'm going to set it on and then just center it. I'm just going to center it by eye. A little bit more right there. Okay, so now the hole for the bungee is centered in between the legs, and all 4 holes are centered perfectly. I like to then use a center punch so I don't get the bit doesn't wander on me. I'm gonna mark the center of each leg. And that's gonna go right through a knot, which will be pleasant. And then I countersink them before I put in the deck screw. I can put the center screw in first, which then just holds it. And now I'm going to countersink. I like to use a center punch. You don't have to, but I like to. I don't go too far with the countersink because I don't want the screw to break through. Usually I don't go down super tight at first. Take it easy. And there you have your 7-inch base attached to the legs. You want to go through and wipe off any excess glue at this point, especially if you use Tight Bond 3 or Tight Bond 2, because you can't get that off with water. I have cut approximately 12 inches of bungee cord, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it through the seat first, through that 5/16 hole, bring it down through the base plate, and then I'm going to pull it through a little bit and tie a knot on the bottom. Just like that. And I've done that on the other side too. So I actually am stringing this up with 2 separate pieces. And so now I'm just going to put the ball in and then bring it down on the other side, pull it super tight, and tie a knot. And we'll see how it goes. I'm going to choose between 2 balls. We have the tennis ball, which works great, but if you have people sitting in the seat a lot and it's getting a lot of wear and tear, they tend to go flat. Then we found that the lacrosse ball works a lot better. So because I have students and they sit, and I have about 120 students sitting on this every day, I'm going to use the lacrosse ball. Now I'm going to feed it back through. Now I'm going to pull it really tight and tie another knot here. And do the same on the other side. And you can see it's tight on the ball, which is what you want. Because when you sit on it, it's going to compress slightly. So what I like to do is leave a little extra cord hanging down so that you can always retie it. Otherwise, you just have to cut it. Because you won't be able to get it untied if there isn't something to grab onto. So I'll probably cut that off and leave about 1.5 inches there. And you can see that the seat is nice and tight. It's not moving around. You can slide it a little bit, but it stays. That's what you want. And now you have your own button chair.